That night changed everything. It started as a dare, really. Jack, ever the fearless leader of our group, had been mocking us about being scared of the beach's so-called haunted reputation. "Come on," he said, the grin on his face sharp in the moonlight. "You're scared of a story? A stupid pier? Let's see it ourselves." None of us wanted to go. The beach was strange. There was something about it, something in the way the waves sounded louder there, the wind always colder. And the pier, well, the pier had its own stories. The locals claimed people went missing out there, never to be seen again. But none of the stories explained why, or how. They just whispered about it, their voices trailing off as if they didn't want to know the answers themselves. Still, there we were, me, Jack, Chloe, and a few others. The night was so dark the beach seemed endless, a black void broken only by the faint silver glimmer of the waves. The pier stood at the far end, its silhouette jagged and broken, almost like a warning. But Jack wasn't one to heed warnings. "Last chance to back out," he said, though his tone made it clear he'd mock us endlessly if we did. Reluctantly, we followed. The sand was cool beneath our feet, the sound of the waves unnervingly loud. By the time we reached the pier, the air had grown colder. Not just chilly, cold, sharp, like the kind that bites at your skin in winter. None of us said anything, but I saw Chloe pull her hoodie tighter around herself, her eyes darting nervously toward the pier. The wood groaned under our weight as we stepped onto it. The sound was wrong. Too deep, too loud. It echoed across the water in a way that made my stomach twist. Jack laughed. "Spooky," he said, his voice mocking. But even he didn't sound as confident as he had before. His flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing the pier's decay. The planks were warped, some broken and missing entirely. Fishing nets were tangled in the wood, and here and there were objects that made no sense, rusted hooks, shards of glass, and a child's doll. The doll's eyes reflected the flashlight's beam, and I could have sworn they followed us as we moved past. "I don't like this," Chloe muttered. She was walking closer to me now, her usual bravado gone. "I really don't." "Relax," Jack said, waving his flashlight around. The beam flickered, then went out. The darkness that followed wasn't normal. It wasn't just an absence of light, it felt heavy, suffocating. The air grew colder still, so cold I could see my breath, even though it was the middle of summer. Then Chloe whispered, "Turn around." There was something in her voice, a mix of terror and certainty that made me obey without question. I turned, and I saw it. A figure stood at the far end of the pier. It was tall, unnaturally so, its outline gaunt and angular. It didn't move, didn't speak. It just stood there, staring, or at least, I think it was staring. I couldn't make out a face. Jack, ever the skeptic, called out. "Who's there?" His voice echoed across the water. The figure didn't answer. It didn't flinch. And then it started walking toward us. Its steps were slow, deliberate, but each one seemed to echo louder than the last. The pier creaked under its weight, a deep groaning sound that vibrated through the air. Chloe grabbed my arm. "We need to go. Now." Jack hesitated. "It's just someone messing with us," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Jack!" Chloe hissed, already pulling me toward the shore. But when we turned to run, the beach was gone. I don't mean it was far away, I mean it was gone. The pier no longer connected to the shore. All around us was water, black and endless, the waves crashing violently against the wooden beams. "This isn't happening," Jack muttered, his voice shaking. He swung the flashlight wildly, but the beam only illuminated more water. Behind us, the figure kept coming. It began to hum, a low, guttural melody that made my skin crawl. It was wrong, like a sound that didn't belong in this world. It was so loud, and yet it felt like it was coming from inside my head. "Jump!" Chloe screamed. "It's the only way." I hesitated, but when I looked back and saw the figure, saw how close it was, its long, thin arms outstretched, I didn't need convincing. I jumped. The water was freezing. It hit me like a wall of knives, stealing the air from my lungs. For a moment, I couldn't tell which way was up, couldn't hear anything but the pounding of my heart. When I surfaced, gasping, I looked around frantically for the others. I saw Jack first, flailing against the waves. "Swim!" I shouted, though I wasn't sure where we were supposed to go. The shore was nowhere in sight. And then I saw it. The figure was standing on the water. It wasn't swimming, wasn't sinking. It was walking, its slow, deliberate pace unbroken. The humming grew louder, and as it moved closer, I saw its face, or the lack of it. It had no eyes, no mouth. Just a pale, featureless void where a face should have been. Jack screamed as the figure reached him, its impossibly long fingers wrapping around his neck. He thrashed, but it was no use. The figure dragged him under, the flashlight tumbling from his hand and disappearing into the depths. "Jack!" I screamed, but he was gone. Chloe grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with terror. "Swim!" she shouted. "We have to keep swimming." We swam until my arms burned, until my lungs felt like they would burst. But the figure kept coming, its humming growing louder, closer. And then Chloe let out a strangled cry. I turned, and she was gone. The water around me was calm now, eerily so. The humming had stopped. I was alone. I woke up on the beach. The sun was rising, casting a soft golden light over the sand. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream. But when I looked around, I realized I was the only one there. There was no sign of Jack or Chloe. No footprints. No pier. The search party never found anything. No bodies, no wreckage, nothing to prove we'd ever been there. But I know the truth. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind is just right, I can hear it, that haunting, guttural hum, drifting in from the sea.